I love it.
Welcome to the Mark Clark Show. Mark and Bootsy back at it.
Yes,
What's
sir.
going on, my friend? How are you, sir?
I'm doing amazing. You're looking very studious.
Well,
Marital too. Bishop,
I don't know what that word you just broke out with, but I take it. Whatever you said.
Yes.
Look,
yes.
This Bootsy, this is we're having some royalty on the show. You know, friend forever.
Okay.
But I don't know, Bootsy, I don't know how many people. Now you got a chance to touch the hem of the garment of Chuck Brown.
Yes, I did.
You got a chance to tour with Earth, Wind, and Fire. You sat at the feet of perhaps, one of the greatest musicians, philosophers of all times, the late Maurice White.
Rest in peace.
Our guest tonight has leapfrogged us all. Not many of us. Now, first of all, super talented media personality. She has an amazing podcast. She's an author. She's a thought leader in the field of religion, something that we need, but we don't have. No, but she actually just recently, Bootsy, interviewed the Pope.
Wow.
And I'm not talking about shook his hand and walked by a couple minutes. She sat down, Bootsy, and is one of the few people in the world who's had a full-scale sit across from conversation, look him in the eye, the Pope. And I was so excited. Again, Allison's childhood friend. So she basically unofficially is family. You know what I'm saying? I'm married in. Without any further ado, Gloria Purvis is in the building. Gloria, what's going on?
Hey, so happy to see you, Mark. Nice to meet you, Bootsy.
Hey, I got the same color on.
We do. Please don't take this as an insult, but at first when you show, I said, is that Marlon Wayans? Do you get that a lot?
But I absolutely take it.
Right. At first I was like, wait a minute. And then when he said Bootsy, I said, okay, that's not Marlon Wayans, but okay.
I've been called worse.
So, okay, now Gloria, first of all, let me just say how proud I am of you.
Oh, Mark.
Now, Bootsy, Gloria, Bootsy, in addition to being a musician and being a famous personality in DC, he's also a teacher. So he's a teacher. He's a cancer survivor,
All right.
Stage 4, 2-time stage 4.
Brother, what?
So when you talk about a relationship with his maker, he got one.
Yes, sir.
Now,
won't he do it? Okay.
And so Gloria, what I love so much, and I know you're not a Bootsy. Gloria, she's not a gloater like us. She's better than us. She's not a gloater, Bootsy.
Humility.
Gloria, who basically is, she is the toast of her space, her niche that she's in. She's the queen right now. but there was a time, Bootsy. There was a time.
Way back in the day.
Come on now, Bootsy. There was a time when they trying to, DJ Khaled always said they when he say they didn't want her to win it. No, they tried to, wait a minute, Bootsy. They trying to tell her that she does not deserve to be the leader of the show or the star of the show or the number one personality on the show, Bootsy. But again, the blessing was, she was raised. She always knew who she was. God told her who she was at an early age. So that really wasn't it. While she was frustrated, Bootsy, she did not believe their words. She did not believe, she understood. And then Bootsy, I saw her go on the path. And Bootsy, you've been there before too, where you go into a new situation or they're thinking about pulling the trigger. They may or may not hire you. They're trying to decide if they want to pick you. When the reality is, the question is, does she want to pick them? And so Bootsy, after all that, oh my goodness, Bootsy.
God did.
Come on now. Yeah. Come on now, Bootsy. True. You bumping your gums talking about we may or may not, or let us think about it, or we might make a decision, we might do it, we might pull the trigger. She met with the Pope, baby. She met with the Pope. Now, who looks foolish now, Bootsy? But again, I'm saying all that not because she ain't gonna say it. That's just me. And it might have been too much information. I didn't give any information out, Gloria. I didn't say no names.
That's okay. You didn't. That's all right.
But Bootsy, it's just that reminder, though. It's that reminder that sometimes these people, when they don't see it, or when they don't feel it, or they have politics around them, or they don't have great intentions around them, it's okay because there's a force out there that's bigger than all those naysayers, those doubters, and those who don't believe. And again, the blessing was Gloria always knows that and knew this, but this right here, this is crazy. The Pope and again, Bootsy, not like shook his hand, like that's enough. Just to shake the hand, you'd be like, oh, this is amazing. Oh my God, I can't believe I shook the hand. No, I'm talking about sit down across from him, look you in the eye, smell your breath. Gloria,
pulling up to the Vatican.
For 2 hours, 2 whole hours.
Okay, so Gloria, let our people know who you are, Gloria. Let's start there. Who are you?
Yeah, so my name's Purvis. Gloria Purvis. I'm really just a follower of Christ. I'm originally from South Carolina, so I'm a Southern girl living up in the DC area. I am really just try to give witness to the dignity of the human person from the womb to the tomb. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a writer. I'm an author. Like I said, writer, author. Also have a podcast, which you got to check out, the Gloria Purvis podcast, available on every podcast app that's out there. And what I really want to do is try to give the microphone to voices that aren't often heard within the Catholic Church. And I talk about the intersection of the church and culture. And that's who I am, just in a very short sentence. I won't talk about any of the other stuff I've done because I'm like, oh, do you need to know that? Maybe not. Maybe it'll come up later in the conversation. But I will say this. I'm the inaugural Pastoral Fellow at Notre Dame University on human life and dignity. And I recently received PhD in humane letters from the University of Portland. So that was a big, exciting things recently. So
accomplished.
Now, Gloria, Bootsy, I call Bootsy the questioner.
Okay.
Because he's got a million questions.
Come on with it.
It's interesting, Gloria, because I think, just because you happen to be Catholic and you happen to be African American, there's so many issues that kind of come up. And I notice you kind of we've talked about it off the air. You get kind of sometimes put in the middle, and there's controversial issues. I think in some cases, a lot of times it kind of goes down, like you said, conservative lines, and we know the politics that are at play. And I think you do a great job of just keeping it real, keeping it real. And years ago, and it's interesting. I'm curious, Gloria, like the space seems like it's kind of changing because of people like you or because of you. But there was a time, even just years ago, right, when you were considered almost outrageous in some circles, right? You almost radical. Like, I'm radical. Why? I'm radical because I'm a Black woman who has to be Catholic. But so Gloria, has that changed at all? Give me a snapshot of, because again, we talked over the years. We've talked, and you've kind of like, it's gone from conception when we talked about certain things to now you are not just doing it, but you've been doing it. It went from you were thinking about, oh, I think I might do this, to now doing it and killing the game.
So Mark, you're being so humble. Mark was big time a mentor. Mark was big time someone that so okay, this is how the deal is in this space. Let me just tell you, okay? It really helping me understand that business part of it. And I'm so grateful to him. And of course, his lovely wife, Allison, that is basically like a sister to me. I mean, we are, but I have to tell you, Mark, absolutely 100% was there for me from day one. Any questions, any doubts, I'd call him up. And he's always so generous with his time. So I have to give mad kudos to Mark Clark for reaching back and helping another one of us. You know what I mean? Even though I'm in a different media space because it's mostly religion based, he helped me understand the business is the business, is the business, And so, Mark, I'm so grateful to you, really, for everything that you have done for me and continue to do for me. So let me just say that straight off the bat. But yeah, I would say there aren't really any Black Catholic voices like mine in the media space, in the sense that for some reason, people assume that if you're Black and Catholic, you just cannot believe everything that the church teaches, that you would be in revolt with what the church teaches. And I'm not. But so when I came out, most people knew me because I was a strong advocate for the dignity of women and preborn children. And because abortion is a lot of times targeted toward Black women, it was surprising for people to see a Black woman who also is a feminist come out and say, I don't think this really helps us. And so it was really new in the Catholic space for a Black Catholic woman the marketing is abortion liberates our community, liberates Black women, helps us get out of poverty and all these things. And I said, hold up, wait a minute, I don't agree with that. And so that got a lot of attention. And I was sad to say that sometimes in the Black community, people assume because you speak like that, they assume that you must be far right wing, nutty kind of self-hating Black woman. And that's not me. I'm a pro-Black, pro-life, pro-woman, pro-family, pro-marriage Black woman, very much within the community. But it also was hard for conservative, white, pro-life, Republican Catholics to sort of where to place me. You know what I mean? They were like, okay, we like her oomph on these things. But then, with Ahmaud Arbery, with Breonna Taylor, with George Floyd, and I was like, yo, this is evil. It was shocking to people because then I helped them see that I do believe human dignity is real from the womb to the tomb. And so to speak out about police brutality is as an evil. In spiritual terms, that police brutality is an evil, that the racism underlying that evil is a rebellion against God's word, really shook up that whole space with these conservative, pro-life, Republican, I'm just naming the things that, MAGA folks were like, what? And it just showed really that in the media space, in Catholic media spaces, I think we had an anemic understanding of human dignity when it came to areas of race. And so here I am in that space, really challenging a lot of political beliefs that people have, right? Challenging them to stop making an idol of politics and follow Jesus Christ, right? So this idea that you have to be Republican or you have to be a Democrat is nonsensical. What you have to be is a follower of Jesus Christ, because no political party aligns with the faith. But what they need to not do is make that political party an idol. You cannot make political leaders an idol. You have to always, always, always go back to what God said. And God said in Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. And we know that is the basis in Catholic teaching for where we get this idea of each human person being made in the image and likeness of God. And because of that, they're worthy of dignity and respect. So I pushed that on people that already believe that, already self-identified as faithful Catholics, and sort of held up a mirror and said, in the area of race, your understanding, acceptance, and profession of that truth is not in alignment, right? And so to say things about the police, like, yeah, this is wrong, this is evil. Police brutality isn't evil, is an intrinsic evil. And for Catholics, when you say something is an intrinsic evil, that means it is never anywhere in any circumstance ever good. So to say that there is no circumstance under which the kind of torture and murder that we saw with George Floyd is ever morally acceptable is hard for people who looked at that video and instead of saying, oh my gosh, this is evil, said, well, what did he do? There's nothing you can do to deserve that, according to the teachings of our faith and our understanding of the dignity of human person, and also the right use of force. It's just a lot of stuff that we believe and have examined as Catholics, which people might not be aware of. And so that really started to make people uncomfortable. People who thought, hey, I'm a good, devout Catholic, it started to rattle them a bit, because I'm pointing out these are areas that we are still in need of conversion, right? None of us have arrived yet. And in particular with the history in the United States, we also as Catholics believe that the evil that someone does, even after they die, the evil act that they did still has repercussions. And so if you look at the evil of racism, even before we were a country, even in the colonies, we are still dealing with the centuries of that evil, okay? And it's going to take effort on the part of believers to confront that evil and dig up the roots that are deeply in the soil of our country, and dig up those roots and jettison it. And that is a very uncomfortable thing for people who, unbeknownst to themselves, have been conditioned to have anti-Black sentiments. But why are they surprised when you rebel against the word of God? And that rebellion is a part of building a nation. Why are we surprised that people will be conditioned to believe those lies, even in ways that they didn't necessarily think about it? But as Catholics, that's the one thing that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be introspective about our cooperation with evil, our attraction to certain evils, and to then, once we recognize that, to work on it. Because our whole goal is to, they say, get rich or die trying. We got the other rap song, get holy or die trying. That's our whole, that's the whole point of it, right? If I say I love God, then the things that are odious to God should be odious to me. And racism is odious to God. And so talking about that has really sort of shaken up the whole space, the whole Catholic space, at least in the United States. And I think let me just say this, I also think it's God's sense of humor that I was first known in Catholic media as someone that believes the hard teachings, right? And so no one then could say, oh, she's just a flake, she doesn't really believe everything. They were introduced to me as somebody to believe the hard teachings that a lot of people struggle with. And then for me to talk about racism, there is no real critique to say I'm not faithful, you see? And so it makes it really hard for a lot of folks who could, to dismiss me. They can't doubt my belief. So, yeah.
And so, it's interesting that we talked about it off the air, and again, this is back when you were, you were getting invited on, and still, I'm still imagining you get invited on these shows, and like you said, in America, everything is broken down in politics.
Yeah,
and I think you kind of expressed that you were concerned that you go on so and so's show, you didn't want to be cast in a certain light,
right?
And so now you actually have got more experience, and you kind of. So when you go into those shows and when you appear on these certain things, can you tell right away that they're trying to put you in a box, or do they put you in a box? Do they let you kind of say your piece? How does it work? Because I think everything is clickbait, everything is headlines, and so a lot of times you go on a show and our show, I'm sure like your show, and I listened to your show, actually listened today. It's a long form, so you can take a clip of what somebody says out of context and just post it as a headline and to sucker people in. Have you been on these shows where you felt like afterwards that they just used you, or they almost kind of played you, or are they pretty clear and pretty straightforward when they have you on the show?
What they try to do is ask me the hard questions that they think they don't have an answer for. And it's particularly around racism, critical race theory, and all those types of things, woke, what does it mean to be woke, all that kind of stuff. Because there is a narrative out there that all that is anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, Catholic, Christian, same thing, but that you can't be a believer and be okay with critical race theory. You can't be a believer and be woke. And so when I'm given those opportunities, I speak to it. A lot of times I will also go on to a show where there's a call-in. And you got to best believe people call in because they're upset. I remember doing on a Catholic show where they called in and it was talking about reparations. And what had come out from the number of people calling in who consider themselves serious Catholic, who are white, is that they perceived reparations to Black people as a punishment against white people. And so I had to take them back to, scripture. Where the rich young man goes up to the Lord and said, "What must I do to follow you?" And he says, "You got to sell all you have and be perfect to follow me." And I was like, if the demands of justice require that you have to let go of some material thing, why are you griping? And justice in a Catholic sense is not justice as we understand it is that every person receives what they are due. And if there has been a harm to a person, justice requires that you repair the situation. And so it was a lot of question about it. I didn't own slaves. And it's like, well, Jesus Christ never committed a sin, but yet he took up a cross and died for you so that you might have a chance at heaven. The answer to upon seeing sin is not, oh, I didn't do that, so I don't want to do anything about it. If you are a lover of God, the answer to seeing sin is to recognize that sin is chiefly an offense against God. And because I love God, I am motivated to make repair for that offense. And this is basic Catholic theology that I'm talking about here. And it's a part of when we go to the sacrament of reconciliation, you confess your sins, but then you're also given a penance to try to repair for the corporal plane, the damage you did, and also on the spiritual plane, any damage that you've done. So you do these things to make repair for the harm that you've created. The sin of racism is a harm to the created order. And as lovers of God, we want to make repair for that harm. And also we do other things as Catholics. Like I'm like, we make reparations for sins of blasphemy, even though I may have never blasphemed. What is it about the sin of racism that makes people not want to do anything about it? I'm like, you do for all these other things you haven't committed sins for because you recognize these are offenses against God. Why do you draw the line at racism? Why do you draw the line at even talking about reparations? And reparations doesn't necessarily mean every white person pays, but it certainly, you have to look at the government's role in not defending the rights of African Americans and the government participating in things to disenfranchise and undermine the development of Black communities. So yeah, we should look at what kind of government answers should there be for the Black community. I mean, slave owners were paid reparations, okay? Right. So reparations aren't new in this country, but the idea of talking about it had just so many people jacked up. But I also invited them to say, hey, stop listening to these secular talking heads and go back to your scripture, go back to the catechism, go back to, reading some of the lives of the saints to see how people deal with, issues of how do you repair for wrongs. So you don't get hyped up and feel like, oh my gosh, are these Black people taking things from me, rather than thinking, oh, I'm making repair for the great evil and harm, to the world because of these sins. I mean, some of this is just basic Catholic theology and our understanding of sin and grace and repentance and things like that. So I wasn't saying anything that they shouldn't already have known. But it was just helping them apply what they already know to this particular situation, which may be, a difficult thing for some people.
I think the way you deliver the message and your knowledge is so powerful, because I think that is, anytime you talk about race, religion, finance, whatever, a lot of times it's hard, especially race and religion and probably sexism, because it's almost like it's hard for even people to relax and listen. They're in the defensive position from the rip. They're not even listening. They're not being objective. It's hard for people to be objective about, religion and race and things like this. So I know, Bootsy, I know you have. So the Pope visit. So Bootsy, I see you there. You're coughing. I didn't know if the devil was trying to push some dust out of you. I don't know what's going on. What do you have? What questions do you have for Gloria before we hop into the whole Pope visit?
Well, first of all, I'm loving the discussion of just being open and honest and transparent. Mark, you may not know this. I was born and raised Catholic.
What?
My mama was a choir director at St. Martin's Church in Washington, D.C.
I know exactly where that is.
Yes. Yes. So
on North Capitol.
Shout out to Father Kelly. Me and him was school. That's my guy.
I had every week, Gloria, this man gives me a secret. I had no idea. Go ahead, Bootsy.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised about 2 blocks away from St. Martin's. I was a part of the youth choir. I went to St. Martin's, the school in the beginning before I went to, and my mom was the choir director there for like 13 years. So
okay.
So as you know, in DC, there is a rich historical thing of the Catholic Church. And for people who do know, at one point, Catholic Church in the DMV, but especially in DC, they were heavy in community issues.
Still are.
And they were heavy into schools. The Catholic school system was probably charter schools before the word charter school came.
Yeah.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
I would love to know, because it has been a interesting relationship with Black women in the Catholic Church. I would love to know, what made you come to this calling, and what did you think your purpose was going to be as a Black woman in the Catholic Church, which traditionally has, I don't want to say they've not been kind, but well,
okay, so when we talk about the Catholic Church, we have to remember it's not just the United States. And actually, the Catholic Church, by and large, is a church of color. Right. It's not a predominantly white faith. I mean, the church right now is blowing up in Africa, in Asia, particularly in the Philippines and stuff like that. I mean, so the church is really blowing up. Now, in the United States, if people are interested, a good book to read would be The History of Black Catholics in the United States by Cyprian Davis, OSB. He's an African American. He's deceased now, but he was a Benedictine monk, a priest. Great book. And what you see in the book is pretty much a history of neglect, and some of it is outright opposition. But then you also see the Black community organizing itself, and the Black Catholic community going out and evangelizing other Black Catholics because of the truth of the faith. So you got people like Daniel Rudd, who started the National Black Catholic Congress, which is still in existence. You've got Venerable Augustus Tolton, who is the first publicly identified Black priest. I mean, there were other Black priests, but they were white passing, and they became bishops from one family. One of them was the president of Georgetown at the time. The Georgetown University didn't admit Black people. I mean, it's just really rich. But the Healy family, they were actually the first Black priests and bishops, but they were not publicly identifying themselves as such. But anyway, so there was always a presence of Black people evangelizing one another, whereas the bishops in this country, in some cases, especially after slavery, just ignored the Black community. Now, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, did not have a relatively speaking, large Catholic population, definitely did not have a large Black Catholic population. But because of the history of segregation, we had still the tradition, the experience, the history, even though I was born way after legal segregation ended, that the Catholic schools were just Black Catholics, and Black people went to one school, white Catholics and white folks went to another school. So I went to a Catholic school from 1st to 12th grade. 1st to 8th grade was in a Black Catholic school. First religious sister I ever met was a Black woman. So my experience of Catholicism was a Black one. I did not know it was any different. So the first religious sister I saw, Sister Mary Mercy, God love her, may her soul rest in peace, in a habit. But guess what? She was an Oblate Sister of Providence that was founded by servant of God Mary Lang, created this religious community of Black women in the late 1700s in Baltimore. Funny thing, before she went to Baltimore, she passed through Charleston. on her way up. And as I was doing research on her in Charleston, did you know free Black people had to pay a tax to stay in the state in South Carolina? I mean, it was a trip. But anyway, so it's so funny how God works. Her yes was a part of the seeds of planting the faith in me. She was the first religious sister, first priest I ever met was a Black man, Father Figaro. He's dead now. May he rest in peace. Also a part of a community of Black men who were priests. He was a Holy Ghost father. So fast forward, first grade, going to Catholic school, 12 years old, had a mystical experience during adoration. That I remember we were in adoration, by the way, with the principal of school who was a religious sister, because we had a food fight at lunch and she was mad. And after we all admitted that, yeah, we did this food fight, instead of like beating us upside the head or expelling us or putting us on probation or detention, she was like, we got to go over to the church. And I went to the Cathedral Church school in Charleston, South Carolina. So right across the parking lot was the Cathedral Church, went into the lower church. They were having adoration. And for those who are not Catholic, that don't know what adoration is when we have something exposed called the Blessed Sacrament, and we'll sit there and just pray to God. So it was during this, and it's quiet. You go in there quiet. You can't go in there making a noise. People will be looking at you like I'm trying to have a moment. Could you shush? So we're in there quiet. And Sister Carmelita, God bless her, was on her knees in front of that monstrance. And the monstrance holds the Blessed Sacrament. And it's a beautiful, usually gold-plated thing in the church, sitting on the altar. And she was on her knees working it out with Jesus. I know she was like, Lord, you gave me these children, they acting a fool, blah blah blah, so she's in there working it out with Jesus, and we all sitting there quiet because we want to live, you know what I'm saying? But it was in that silence, Bootsy, that my body was consumed with flames. So I knew I was on fire, but it didn't hurt. And as I was consumed with the flames, I immediately knew that what was in the monstrance was alive and real. And I will never forget that sensation, nor have I ever forgotten that particular truth that I feel like has been imprinted on me that I've never forgotten. And it was from that encounter that a few days later, when Sister Carmelita came to my class and said, hey, I want to, get the Catholics ready for confirmation. And I went up to her and I said, Sister, I think I'm supposed to be a Catholic. And she was like, you ain't coming up in here just saying you're going to be a Catholic. You got to go home and get your parents' permission. You can't just... And I didn't do that. I went home and told my parents that I was becoming a Catholic. And they did not resist that. My mother said, oh, you going to be a Catholic? I was like, yeah. My dad said, what's she talking about? And she's like, I got this. You're going to go to church every Sunday, every holy day of obligation. You're going to pray your rosary, and you're not going to eat meat on Fridays. You got it? And I was like, I got it. And that's what happened. So 12 years old, I was going to mass by myself. My parents, my family, everybody supported it. Yep. And then later, all my sisters converted to Catholicism much later. And then our husbands were Catholic or either converted to Catholicism. So now everybody in the family is Catholic and the grandkids are Catholic. The only people who didn't ever convert were my parents and my grandmother.
And you know what? God bless your parents. We had a chance to, like, as Gloria said early on, friends of the family.
Oh yeah.
We had a chance to stop by and see your parents.
Yes, they love you.
Home. In South Carolina. And it's like, it's so interesting. Your story, it's interesting at 12, right? You were 12.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of times we say our kids aren't old enough to make these decisions or that decisions. I always just tell the story about my mother. And I said, you should have been the president. My mother was like, she was like the reverse of you. And this has nothing to do with Catholicism, but I just wanted to share it with my mom was 12 at the same time. So imagine, Bootsy, I think you know this story. So my mother's mother came home and said that they were going to become Jehovah's Witnesses. And my mother was 12 years old. And this is a Black mother, y'all. She comes home and her sisters and brothers, the ones who weren't married, who were in the house, they all signed up. My mom said no.
Oh.
I was like, what? You said no to your mother? I said, yeah. I said, what did she do? She said she started crying. I said, then what did your dad do? He said, you should listen to your mother. And what did you do? She said, I'm not going to do it.
All right.
I was like, wow. I was like, that's just amazing. It's interesting.
Yeah.
You were convicted, whereas my mother, her decision was, no, I'm not doing that. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to share that because it just speaks to a lot of times, I know with my kids, we kind of reign over our kids, or we kind of boss them around. We don't really give them that freedom that they probably need, because I think when you talk about religion, it has to be something that most people, sadly, don't really pick their religion. They don't pick their belief system. They kind of like just emulate what their parents are doing. Most people. And that's why I think there's in a lot of ways, such a disconnect, because people don't really know why. Well, why do you do it? I don't know. What makes you? I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know. It's just like you just, live your life living what your parents choose. And so the fact that I think that passion that burns within you is because it was a decision that you made. And again, these relationships that you have with whatever you believe in, it may not even be God. It's your relationship. Nobody else can dictate that. It has to be. And so anyway, now you actually had, again, the blessing, the privilege to actually meet and interview the Pope. Please share with us that journey.
So here's the beautiful thing about it. We met in his house. We didn't go to the Apostolic Palace. He's like, I want y'all to come to my house. So that's where we were. We were at his house for 2 hours.
And by the way, he didn't say, I want y'all to come to my house, though. He didn't say that part.
Well, he did to whoever it was.
He was like,
no, well, because he had to, because if he wanted us to meet at the Apostolic Palace, he has to say that, right?
I love it.
And you can't just show up at the Pope's house and say, hey, we're here for the interview. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't work like that. So he did have to make it clear that you come to my house. We're not going to Apostolic Palace. And right off the bat, if you go into his house, it's a different feel. The Apostolic Palace is fantastic. Okay. I was like, doggone, I want to be inside there and see it. But I'm much happier to go to his house and have a much more intimate experience. And when you go to the Pope's house, by the way, he lives in Vatican City, which is its own little country, really. So you have to go through loads of security. And it's kind of cool to see those Swiss Guard in their like centuries old outfits. But somebody was telling me those dudes know jujitsu. So don't mess with them. Don't mess with them. Okay. Don't mess with them. And they also are all the Swiss Guard, because they were something that this I want to say the Swiss monarchy centuries ago gave them as protectors of the Holy Father. I don't know the whole history, but literally the Swiss Guard, you must be Swiss. You must be Swiss born. And just a little side note, they had their first Swiss Guard of color. I wouldn't say the last 10 years, who is Swiss. He was adopted by a Swiss family. And I want to say he was a dark-skinned Indian. I want to say he was from India. So you had this dark-skinned Swiss Guard, which was like a big, new thing, but he was 100% Swiss. So anyhow, that was like an interesting aside. I didn't see him. I think he's already done his term and is out. But anyway, so we're going in, we go to his house and we go in this room, and it doesn't have like any grand tables or anything like that. It's just some chairs and a little semicircle. Now, let me just say this. The Pope's house is nice. He decided, instead of living in the regular papal place, which is not the Apostolic Palace, but the regular place that the other popes lived before, like John Paul and Benedict, he decided to move into what they call a dormitory. So he lives at Casa Santa Marta, which is a dormitory, but it ain't a dormitory like what we think. Like, okay, let me just say it's still nice, still very nice. And so we're in there waiting for the Holy Father, and I look. And he just walking up the hallway with his walker, and he's very steady. He's very robust. He wasn't like swinging from side to side. He's just using the walker to walk. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's nobody introducing him. Nothing, So he comes in, and one of the people in my group introduces him to all of us. And he's just like, hey, he just was so personable. He looked really good. I tell you, if we had sneaked in a steak and a bottle of wine, he would have been happy, because he's Argentinian and they like steak and wine and stuff. So I'm telling you, he was just so like eager and to meet us. And when he looked me in my face, the way his eyes brightened and the smile, I just knew. You just felt the love, and you felt that he was genuinely happy to see you. That's what I felt. And his closeness to me, to get so close into me and to shake my hand and to just, let me know he's happy to see me. And then we sit down there and we spent 2 whole hours talking about everything. And let me tell you something, he was not at all defensive. He was not in any way like trying to be clever or to maneuver around. He talked straight on, dead on. It's dead on, looked you in your face, talked to you. Okay. It was not any kind of dance around or I don't want to answer this. It was like a man talking to his sheep, his children, and that there's nothing off limits for us to discuss. Nothing, nothing. And just a authentic, right? Just an authentic person. And one of the things that kind of made me laugh is, there was a question like, people are saying you haven't named the Russians in this Ukrainian thing. He's like, well, who else am I talking about? Who else could I possibly be talking about when I'm talking about these things? But it was kind of like, it was so funny when you see, well, who else am I talking about then? And by the way, the Russians got really mad after the interview we had with the Holy Father, because he did name the Russians. And so it was all over Russian media. The Russian foreign press secretary was losing her mind. And then this is all of a sudden the Vatican.va website was down. And, all of us are like, was this the Russians hacking, doing this in retaliation? Don't know. But it was just an interesting sort of coincidence right after all this. I asked him two very specific questions. I asked him about, I gave him a little background, which I'm sure he already knew, but I was like, we as Catholics know abortion isn't evil. That's a no-go. And then I was telling him, how about in the United States recently, the Supreme Court ruled that there's no constitutional right to abortion. And should our bishops prioritize abortion in relation to other social justice issues? Right? To ask him that, because there's so much polarization. And he did say polarization is not Catholic. He's like, that is just not even a Catholic thing. All this left, right is nonsensical and wrong. He basically says, the bishops need to be bishops. They have got to be shepherds to their people in all regards. And so whereas a bishop or the church's response is seen as merely socio-political is a mistake. That we've got to be, he's not saying that we can't be, wanting legislation to defend life in the womb and to protect mothers and all that stuff. He's not saying we can't do that, but that cannot be all that you do. You have to be, for the bishops particularly, you must be shepherds. You've got to be a pastor. You must care for the people that God has given you. And each bishop in the United States has their own territory, if you will. We call them dioceses. So each bishop is responsible not just for the Catholics, but for every soul in that diocese. And it was just such a call out to his brother bishops, because he's also not only the Pope, he's also the Bishop of Rome. It is such a call out to all his brother bishops to have the heart of love towards your people. And no matter what circumstance they're in. And he talked about, saints and sinners alike, they're all together to the end, and we are called to serve them. And it was just such a beautiful response. Then I asked him about racism, and basically was like, why should any Black Catholic stay in the church? Right? And he says, I want you to let every Black Catholic in the United States know that I suffer with them. And he says, and he's like, don't we have Black bishops too? Right? Like, this is a good thing. I said, yes, but the typical experience of the average Black Catholic in the United States is not in a church with Black priests or not in a church with Black people. The average Black Catholics in the United States is in a church with a white priest and white folks who may be hostile or indifferent to our suffering. And the tenderness, good Lord, the tenderness in his response after I said that he says, I want to say to the Black Catholic community, I love you. I love you. And I want you to resist and stay in the church. And it was just such a profoundly beautiful moment. And it's not resist in like you're going to go against what the church teaches, because that's not making sense. He's saying resist the temptation to flee. Resist the temptation to flee. And so it is calling for us to persevere, in a sense, in the faith, in a place where sometimes it might not be comfortable. But I understood what he was saying, and I also understood what we lose when we leave, because of these other folks. A friend of mine used to say, you don't leave Jesus because of Judas, right? You don't do that. You don't leave Jesus because of Judas.
so
Okay, but
so
it's a
Gloria,
hard thing sometimes.
is the
But it's beautiful.
racism within let me just ask this. So are there other countries that maybe don't face the level of racism that most blacks and Americans, most Catholic bishops or most Catholic priests in America face? Is there a country that, are there black countries that you don't have that, or is it around the world?
So you have tribalism in Africa, right? Which is not racism, but boy, they got some tribal issues in Africa that does play out. I mean, what we have to remember is the doors of the church are not a shield against sin. People come in with their brokenness, right? And so what we have to distinguish between is that the teachings of the church are true, even if her people are sinners. Okay. And so the brokenness of the human person is a universal thing across the world, but we do have a particular kind of history of racism in the United States. But the Holy Father did allude to, this is a problem everywhere, right? But we do have a particular kind of documented history in the United States. I mean, slavery jacked a lot of stuff up. You have religious communities owning slaves. You had Catholics owning slaves. The Jesuits are doing their, what is it? Their 272 reparations for the descendants of the 272 African Americans that were sold to make sure Georgetown University could still stay in business. And by the way, that was they took the names off the building of the Jesuits that did that, and the Jesuits did that completely against what this superior general in, I think at the time in Rome, sent them, saying you cannot sell, these people cannot break up these families. And these two Jesuits like, we sure gonna do that because we need that money. And so the Jesuits have, I think, pledged $100 million in reparations to the descendants of the 272. And so like their kids can go to Georgetown University at free, just a lot of things, right? So racism has its effects, still has its problems. And again, the doors of the church, doors of no church, for real, no church doors is a shield against sin. If people come in broken and with sinful tendencies and acting on those things, we go there so that we can be healed. We go there to receive grace and help in this walk, right? And we go there with our eyes open, realizing that this is our life's work. I remember when I was an adult and came to the conclusion, I got to do this forever. I was like, forever, ever? Like Outcast? And the answer is yes, forever, ever. We are called to reject sin, or as we say during Lent, on Ash Wednesday, we get those ashes on our forehead to remind us that from dust we have come, and dust we return, and repent and believe in the gospel. That's our life's work. And so it's no different for me. I might be jacked up in a different way. You know what I'm saying? But it's the same thing. And let me just say this too, which I think when I do a lot of speaking nationally and internationally on this matter, I've done a lot of Catholic spaces. And I tell these white folks, I was like, you're a victim of racism too, in that as much as you were seduced by that lie from the pit of hell, you are behaving beneath who God made you to be. So yes, while my people are on the receiving end of that oppression, you also are being deceived and deformed. Okay, because you are not behaving according to God's plan for the human family. Right. This racism has got you wrecked. And you have to, just like all of us, we have to do this introspection and discover our brokenness, and I tell them, I said, and it's going to be a very hard thing because of so much conditioning in the media, just the way that we even talk about things. There's so much conditioning to anti-Blackness in this country that sometimes people don't even detect it. Yeah. So when you start to, and I encourage people to pray and ask God to reveal these things. And I said, when you ask him, be ready. Okay. Because he does slowly can pull the veil off of people's eyes. And if you sincerely find evil repugnant, he will show you that evil that you hold closely.
Come on now.
Okay. So for people to try to wake up, to be awakened, to be woke, right? To the suffering of another, particularly in the area of race, and want to do something about it is the most Catholic thing you can do. And a part of that is this introspection to discover, as we say when we say our act of contrition, to help me avoid the near occasion of sin and sin itself. But to avoid the near occasion of sin, I got to recognize it. So that's why every night as Catholics, one of the things we're supposed to be doing, not everybody does it, sometimes people don't even know it, is we're supposed to be thinking about the 4 last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And we also supposed to be doing our examine for how to, throughout the day, how did I fail? And how did I do all right? And then ask the Lord for grace and help to do better the next day. But a part of that is recognizing my own tendencies and preferences to certain types of sins. Yeah, so that I can try to do better with God's help and his grace and all that stuff.
So Gloria, how have you been changed after meeting the Pope?
Oh my gosh, I'm still meditating on the things that he said. One of the things that I think definitely changed me is I realized that the secular press in the United States has not helped us understand or report at all on who he is. I think because we see somebody as a world leader, somebody with as much power as we perceive that he has, they want him to act in the way of a head of state that can wield power. But one of the things he said in the interview is he says, "I am not a conqueror." And because, it was like, people are mad about your relationship with China and they feel like you ain't saying nothing. And China's, talking about these people who we want to appoint to be bishops. And you all are like, well, okay, we like to, they're like, why aren't you saying something? He said, he sees things differently than we do. He doesn't see things as either or. He's like, it's not a matter of speak or don't speak. It's a matter of dialogue or not dialogue. And I choose the path of dialogue, even if it is more difficult, even if it has had errors and some successes. But that is the path I choose. And I choose it because the people of God in China are good people. You know what I mean? So one of the things that I recognize with the Holy Father is, A, we don't get an accurate understanding of him through secular press here. And B, he sincerely wants to be docile to the Holy Spirit. He wants to do what God wants him to do. And he's been so terribly calumniated, meaning people have said cruel, untrue things about him. People have assigned certain intentions to him that you don't get that when you talk to this man. And I also felt one of the things that on the way, let me just tell you this, one of the things on the way to meet him that came to play while I was sitting there listening to him, as I was walking through Vatican City, I saw this wall, and in Latin it said, this is the site of Nero's circus, the site of the first apostle, Peter, who, Pope Francis' successor to St. Peter. He was martyred. St. Peter was martyred on this particular site in Vatican City. And I was like, oh, I want to go back there and I want to go see it. And then I heard something say to me that says, no, you have to go see the current Peter while he's undergoing his own martyrdom. And I felt that when I was sitting there listening to the Holy Father speak, I was like, this man is so misunderstood. This man is so maligned. And yet he remains. And yet he remains. And he's not always trying to put up a defense of his reputation. In fact, he says, I deserve to be talked about. I am a sinner, but you should not talk about Holy Mother Church. You should not turn people away from the church. And so that to me really meant something. And also when he said, I love you to Black Catholics, I am with you in your suffering. I just think it's going to be a balm to a lot of people's wounds who haven't had that experience in their local church. When the Pope, the Supreme Pontiff, you got like 8 titles, the Vicar of Christ, when he says that, it has a meaning and a message to each and every one of us, Black Catholics in the United States, to say, I love you. I suffer with you. Stay. I mean,
and so
it's just so much.
And so people can get they can read the full interview. Tell her where to go.
Yeah, you can go to americamagazine.org. And then when you get there, just do Pope interview on the search thing and it'll come right up. And they have some great pictures. There was a picture of me and the Holy Father standing together, and he looks really happy. He was laughing at the time. Then we took the picture. He's great. He's also got a sense of humor, Mark. Oh my goodness. I was laughing. Now, granted, the interview was in Spanish, and I speak Spanish, and the Holy Spirit helped me understand everything he was saying. And we did have a translator with us as well, but he also understands some English, because some questions he just started answering right away.
Wow.
Before the translator could translate it. And then I've said a few things to him in Spanish. He's like, she gets it, she gets it, she gets it. It's pretty funny. And one last thing that I'll say, well, we asked him, one of us asked him, say, are there any things you regret? You've been Pope 10 years now. Any things you regret? He's like, everything, something like that. If I could do it all, having the gift of hindsight. But he says, whenever I did not listen to the Holy Spirit is when I made mistakes. But when I listened, I was always on the safe path. And he also did tell us he goes to confession every 2 weeks. Sacrament of Reconciliation every 2 weeks.
Well, Gloria, we are so proud of you. You are a superstar. Once again, if people want to follow you and listen to your podcast, where do they go? You go to any podcast, any of your podcast plays is the Gloria Purvis podcast, and Purvis is PURV as in victory, IS. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Gloria_Purvis, on Instagram at I am Gloria Purvis, and then on Facebook, just Gloria Purvis. My page is open. Just follow me there. And I would love to hear from you. You can DM me anytime. I'd love to hear from you, especially if there's certain things you'd like to hear on the podcast, anything like that. Very open to it. Gloria, thank you so much. Any final words, Bootsy, as we let Gloria go?
No, thank you. It was amazing. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Well, Bootsy, since are you still in DC area? Are you still in DC?
100%.
Okay, so next summer, July of 2023, the National Black Catholic Congress is having their 5-year Congress right here in the DC area, out there at that place in PG County where they have some gambling and a nice hotel out there. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, the National Harbor.
National Harbor. Yes, right there. We're gonna have. So I'm gonna be looking for you there. I'm gonna send you the information. And once a Catholic, always Catholic. Baptized, change your soul. You still Catholic, brother.
And guess what? And I'm gonna be looking for you to speak to my amazing broadcast journalism students who I teach. I teach college and high school journalism.
I would love to do it. I would love you to. I would love to come. And one of the things that I tell people, if you're a journalist, your responsibility is to report the truth. And we know that language is a tool of conveying the truth. So how we use our language can either obscure or reveal the truth. So I'd love to come and talk with your students about that and having, virtuous journalism. That's really important.
I love it.
So, yeah.
Gloria, thank you so much. Love you.
Thank you. Love you too. All right, guys. Have a great night. And Merry Christmas if I don't see you guys before then.
Definitely.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Gloria Purvis joining us, Bootsy Vegas. And it's so interesting, it's almost like surreal that you would meet the Pope, right? I mean, huh?
That's
and not just meet the Pope. What'd you say?
No, that's like the equivalent of hitting the lottery.
It's crazy. And the thing, Bootsy, again, the funny part about broadcasting with Gloria, I won't say the specific channels, but you can imagine a Black woman in that space, and they were hemming and hawing this certain platform about pulling the trigger. Now here's somebody who's been speaking all over the world, who is brilliant, obviously. And the old guard, they had teamed her with some older guys, and they, you're fighting over the microphone, and then this other large platform was hemming and hawing, have her sit in for a week, and then, well, we don't know. Well, let's think about it. And then, like you said, from the broadcasting, Bootsy, and what we've been through, I told her, man, forget about those cats. And then here comes a company that paid her, almost, much more than was even in the conversation before, and fully support with, producers and marketing and promotion. And now the Pope. Imagine if she had taken that other spot just because it had a big name, and because, you know what I mean? And so I think it's you and I have been through this so many times, but it's just always a reminder, Now, it's interesting. I as I get older, Bootsy, it's weird. When we talk about formalized religion, the formal religion, I'm finding as I get older, I'm actually losing grip on that. You know what I mean? I'm less likely to go to church, less likely to follow a certain way of doing things.
Right. I know.
More
I
likely
know what
just
you're trying to
to
say.
just more likely to just have conversations with whatever I believe in. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But at the same time, whatever that thing is that pushes your button or that motivates you, that I think that's it. You just have to believe in it. And for some
Right.
people, it's it's a religion. Some people it's not. Some people it's whatever it is. I think everybody has a right to do that. But I marvel though at people like Gloria who's really studied,
Right.
and it's
Passionate, found their purpose, but also
exactly.
their purpose in the midst of it, which is not always
Exactly.
the case.
Exactly. Because I think that's the part. I think, and like I said earlier, I think a lot of it, I really realized, as somebody who was searching and asking questions, I realized a lot of people, majority of people don't really have the answer. They just do what their mom and daddy told them to do.
Right.
Or they told them what Big Mama told them to do. And I think
Pretty much.
sadly, then when those moments come, like you face the ultimate, you face death. You
Right.
stare at death. And that's when whatever you believe in, that's when it comes, probably that's the moment, right?
Yeah.
I'm asking that, Boosie, because you know better than me. Isn't that pretty much true? I imagine.
100%, my brother. 100%. It was them years of faith, prayer, learning, subscribing to it, and that was the moment when it was time for it to kick in. So 100%.
And
100%.
Bootsy, some people hear voices. In your case, did you hear voices? Was it a
One-
feeling? What did you go through in
I
your
had
darkest hours?
I had voices, but I will say this: I had clear signs, and I had 2 clear dreams
Mm.
that had kind of predicted the future. And I've actually talked about this. Donnie actually talked about it. Had me come on the show talk about that. I had a dream about my mother and father taking me to an award ceremony, and it was basically they were telling me, yeah, we're proud of everything you do. We can't wait to do. We're proud of everything that you've done. They were asking me questions on how'd you meet Donnie, how'd you meet Maurice, all that. And then they kept saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see what you're going to do next." And then I kind of woke up out of the dream. To me, that was a clear 100% sign of we've been with you, we've been watching you, we're proud of you, keep going. And I knew what my purpose was when I left. Like I knew, I'm going back to Deanwood. I am 100% going back to Deanwood. I tell everybody, even all the success the last 2 years that you have witnessed this boom happen the last 2 years. I knew it back then in 2019, 2018. That was when I had knew. I just knew, okay, this is where I need to go. And as you see, because you've had the same journey where we were last year and the year before. Like right now, I've been cracking this joke. So I'm doing right now what I was doing when I was 18, 19. I was doing broadcast journalism, teaching young kids, and playing go-go music. In 2022, I'm teaching broadcast journalism, teaching kids, ministering, and I'm playing go-go music. The exact same thing that I was doing in 1990 something.
Your passion.
Yeah.
Your gift.
I mean? Yeah, because it does not feel like work. That's the other thing. Like what I do does not feel like work. And Lord knows, I did a 6.5 hour vocal session with Raheem Devon. Yeah, it was a lot. But I looked like, man, I have actually, learned something. So, you know what I mean? But I kind of knew early. Like my faith led me to this moment. I've been, as you know, I crack jokes about me being young Maurice White, the rebirth. I've been cracking this joke for like 4 years now. And now there's a commercial promoting our New Year's Eve celebration. And I'm saying I'm young, and people becoming like, "Oh yeah, I heard you on the radio saying you young Maurice White, the rebirth." And I'm like, "Well, y'all know I've been telling y'all this for, the last 4 years." So, I had already walked in faith. I knew this was coming. I knew to be patient. And my faith in those years of practicing, believing, learning, embracing, subscribing to it has led me to where I'm at right now.
Come on. And with that, thank you, Sir Bootsy.
Absolutely.
Back at it. Any parting words?
No, man. Just thank you as always. In these podcasts as we do, we never know who's going to come. We never know what we're going to hear, but it's always great intellectual conversations for our community. And we got a perspective of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
That probably needed to be heard or needed to be emphasized. And it's giving you a perspective, you know what I mean, on it. So, man, I loved it as always. Like every time I just get excited when you call me and say, you can still do this with me. So I'm excited about that.
And I just love, you always have an angle. You always are tied. You never know. You never know. Bootsy Vegas, you never know about this guy.
Oh, and mind you, I left 2 questions off because she was getting very detailed. You know, a lot of times, you know, your guests don't really take that long to break it down. I mean, she was so informative and descriptive, it was best to, you know, just let it go. But, you know, if you did your research on her, she had a discussion about Nancy Pelosi, you know what I mean? So, you know, for people who have done their homework, and I just say, you guys go Google that as well. But thank you, man. I enjoyed it.
All right, Boots Vegas.